Good morning, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mary Pat, we're ready. Mary Pat, we're ready. Good morning, colleagues and audience members. My name is Ed Reisinger. I am the chairman of the Land Use and Transportation Committee for the Baltimore City Council. We are here this morning to conduct our 12th work session on City Council Bill 12-0152, Transform Baltimore Zoning. During our 11th work session held on Tuesday, July the 8th, we completed pages 113 through pages 134. On today, we will start on page 117 through 135, and beginning on page 30. Yeah, and on line 1, section 8-101, and work on as much as we can during today's session in 2 hours. We usually have these work sessions for 2 hours to let the audience know. We are going back to Article 7, Open Space and Environmental Districts, because some of my colleagues had some concerns and questions regards to critical areas and floodplains. All the microphones up front are on, so I just want you to be aware, since they're on, watch what you say to each other, because this is being recorded correctly? Yes. Okay. Title 7, yeah. I just want to acknowledge that we have, to my left is Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark. Second to my left is Councilwoman Vicky Spector.
Thank you.
To my immediate left is Councilman James Kraft, who is the Vice Chair of the committee. We're also joined by Angela Gibson, representing Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. Also, we are joined by Kara Kuntz, and also Paul Plymouth, who's representing the President of the City Council, Bernard Jack Young. And also we have with us John Willis, who is the attorney for the Land Use and Transportation Committee. At this time, we are ready to go back to, At this time, we're ready to go back to Title 7, which is on page 117, in regards to the critical area and also the floodplain. So,
Okay.
Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are going to discuss, my understanding of the committee's questions are regarding subtitle 3 on page 119, the floodplain overlay district, and the need to update this to be consistent with the recent council action, and subtitle 4 on critical area. Beth Stroman, our division chief for sustainability, has her team here for both of these issues. We also have the state planner who handles critical area here. So I'll let Beth lead off. We'll do subtitle 3 first, starting on page 119, and I believe that's going to be sort of a substitution. And Beth will introduce each of the people.
Okay. Beth?
Do you want me to introduce just the floodplain people now, and then we'll do the critical area people when you get to Title 4, Subtitle 4? All right, so there are actually 3 of us now working on floodplain. There used to be just one. There's myself, who's the director of the Office of Sustainability. Behind me is Zane Hadzik, our newest staff member. He's our assistant floodplain manager.
How does that affect our budget, your budget?
Zane is paid for through grants. The Federal Emergency Management Administration, as well as the Maryland Emergency MEMA and FEMA, how's that, are so interested in what we're doing and so supportive that they have covered Zane's salary. As well as Kristen Baja is the official new floodplain manager, replacing Ken Hranicki. So she just moved into his open position.
Okay.
But I can explain to you why it takes 3 of us now. Okay, that's sort of where I'm going to go into this, is why we have all these corrections as you see it. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. You got a mic? Councilwoman Clark.
What is, can you spell these last names, Zane's last name, for example?
Hadzik.
Say the whole name again.
H-A-E.
Zane,
Z is in
Yeah,
zebra.
let him,
Zane Hadzik. Say it again.
Zane Hadzik. It's H-A-D as in dog, Z as in zebra, I-C-K.
And then, what's Kristen's last name?
It's Baja, B-A-J-A.
E.
No, Kristen, K-R-I-S-T-I-N. Baja, B-A-J-A.
She's the floodplain manager, can't
Yeah. She's replacing Ken.
Thank you.
So, anything else?
we're joined by, to my far left, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, so there's a tremendous amount going on now in the world of floodplain management, and one should not be surprised by that, because if you see Superstorm Sandy and the results of that, we recently had Isabel, which was a storm of record here in Baltimore, and the one that starts with a K down in Katrina, down in Louisiana. The bottom line is these huge storms are coming more up. In fact, just recently, we broke records for flooding twice, okay, in the past since April, all right, in the area. When you look at that and you combine it with the new federal mandates, the Biggert Waters Act at the federal level, which is basically requiring FEMA to not be bankrupt all the time, to charge fees for flood insurance that are the actuarials actually cover the cost of these storms. Basically what's happening is it's a perfect storm, and everyone in the country's flood insurance is going to go up 100% roughly over the next 4 years, okay? We saw that coming and decided to take action to help offset that. How do we do that? The first is we're working with FEMA to update all of our flood maps so that they are as accurate as one can possibly be. Okay, so you're going to be seeing us back in front of you a lot, updating the maps. We've got another one coming in a year. The next thing we did is we're going through something that FEMA is calling a community assistance visit, but it's really an audit. And you don't feel like you're being assisted, you feel like you're being tortured. They call it a CAV. And what they're doing is going through, almost like page by page, our entire program over the past 2 years, as well as they drove our entire floodplain and examined properties to see if they were in compliance. We're in the middle of this audit right now. Once we go through this audit and complete it, it's called a CAV, we'll get something called a letter of good standing. The thing that they required, we just updated, as you know, our floodplain ordinance. As part of the CAV, they went back and reevaluated again, even though they had just evaluated it and suggested changes. That's why you're getting yet another bill for the floodplain. FEMA required us to change it yet again, okay? That's why I'm telling you, don't be surprised if we're back again, okay? Because FEMA, we do what FEMA tells us, because if we don't, they'll take away our flood insurance or increase the rates of our residents.
So, my question is, when you say we're getting a new bill for the, are we getting amendments, amendments to the new, to the bill that we just adopted, or are we getting a whole new floodplain ordinance?
I'm sorry, I'm referring to the one that's before you right now, that we're recommending that you take what's in Transform and just erase what's in Transform and adopt what just did.
Yeah,
I think based on the questions the committee had last time, if we look at subtitle 3 on
so-
page 117, you have it on paper to give to the committee, the new one?
Yeah.
We are suggesting we strike subtitle 3 as drafted back in 2012 and replace it with a new subtitle 3 that reflects what you just passed in April of 2014. Yes.
Okay.
So, did you bring the copies to give? Yeah. So these are, and I don't know who, Jennifer or, if the committee needs the copies. So, bottom line, our recommendation is strike subtitle 3 as drafted and replace with what has been enacted as the new
So
subtitle
this would-
3.
my question, this would go all the way, when you say strike all three, that
It's-
would go all the way over to page 123 before we hit subtitle 4,
Yes.
right?
So it's striking, yeah, subtitle 3 in its entirety, which goes to the middle of page 123.
Okay.
And what you're being handed is exactly what this council passed in the spring of 2014 to meet the requirements. There's a minor, relatively minor technical correction that's still working its way through the committee, I believe, now to
It's
that
going to
spring.
second reader.
So is that new, is that all, that subtitle 3 is all substantive in nature now? I mean, is that plus technical, the way you're changing it? I mean, the whole thing's being changed.
Yes, it was all changed in the work that Beth's team, along with FEMA, did in the early spring of 2014. But since City Council Bill 120152 was already in the hopper,
Just,
it wasn't aligned. So rather than go back and change it on a line by line, our recommendation is a strike and put the new one in.
I get it.
And I have a question.
Go ahead.
So that would also negate any amendments that we had talked about to the prior subtitle 3 that are out, because we're
Correct.
putting a new.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Everything's in what was handed to you.
Right,
Okay.
and FEMA requires this. It's not
Right.
like we have much say in it.
Councilman Clark, microphone.
Just so I have my subtitles correct, we are deleting subtitle 3, which goes from 119 to the middle of 223.
Middle of
123.
123, excuse me. Yeah, there it is. And we're replacing it with this.
That's correct.
Which was enacted in 2014.
Right, now, but
Roll.
we're calling this subtitle 2?
It'll get, once it's,
We need to, so we will now go through this and amend to make it fit, right?
it will have to be renumbered, obviously, to go in here, but, right. That doesn't, what you got handed doesn't reflect a need to renumber.
Okay, I got you, I thought.
So I guess that's a note for the committee, obviously needs to be properly renumbered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beth?
Yep, so that's pretty much it for now. I gave you all that background, in terms of, right now, if you just take and adopt what is in the code, you'll be up to date with FEMA and what they're requiring for the city. But just as a warning, that we'll be back in about a year, because things just keep changing with Federal Emergency Management Administration, so we'll be saying hi again and changing.
Something.
Well, and what we're doing is, the reason we're going through all this is we want to lower the flood insurance rates for the citizens of Baltimore.
Right,
So there's a good reason to do it.
it's worth it.
And I don't know to whom I should address this question, whether it would be Beth or Laurie. But just following up on your initial remarks regarding the increased flooding occurrences and the likelihood of ever increasing flooding occurrences. And I want to tie this to my district in particular, the Harbor East area going into Fells Point, through there. We have increasing flooding down through there, ever increasing flooding, it appears, and it seems to get deeper each time that we have the flooding. We're continuing to have additional construction down there, bringing, and I don't know what the result of that construction is going to be, although we're going into the ground more, we're building more foundations for taller buildings and that sort of stuff. Is all of that taken into account in terms of how that disrupts and how that interferes with water flow and, I don't know if I'm asking the question properly.
The question is the engineering of that, like
The
its impact when
engineering,
you
the,
put one building.
yeah, and, you know, how
that's
we
them.
zone and how we build and,
Yeah,
you know,
That's the
it
technical.
is
stuff.
taken into account, and I got lots of good news for you,
Right.
actually. Okay, so it's taken into account on multiple levels. It's taken into account through Department of Public Works, obviously, when they're reviewing their stormwater management. So that's the direct harbor, so they have to control what they call quantity as well as quality. So that's the quantity is what you're talking about. But in addition, these new floodplain regulations we adopted are the most up-to-date that you can get in terms of the actual building design. Okay, so there's these new standards called ASCE 24, very detailed. They're part of the building code, and they make sure that all those buildings are flood-proofed to the maximum extent possible.
okay.
Okay?
Now, continuing along that line is also the ability to use the roads. Because right now, you can't travel through there as it is because of the traffic density during any given day. There's just too many cars. So when you add to it the propensity for flooding, then a normal traffic backup that ties everybody up for, you know, makes a 5-minute ride of 20-minute ride, makes a 5-minute ride an hour and a half ride, or there's no ride at all because there's no way to get in and out. So
Yep.
how do we address that, and is that addressed through this flood?
That is addressed through the
plan.
Disaster Preparedness Planning Project, or DP3, that you may have been hearing about a lot. So recently, we completed and the Planning Commission adopted DP3, the Disaster Preparedness Planning Project. And what that does is outline a series of recommendations for studies, improvements, changes to policies that would anticipate and address that as part of a grant that we got. Okay, so we're actively applying for funding to begin to address these new impacts. I mean, it's a fact. Baltimore City is the second highest increase in nuisance flooding in the state. Okay, so you're not imagining it, there is more flooding occurring. So we retained the Office of Sustainability in assistance with the Department of Public Works. We retained Moffitt and Nickel engineers to do an analysis of Fells Point.
Well, even to piggyback on Councilman Kraft, even if we weren't doing transform Baltimore because the rezoning, you would have to be doing that anyway because of.
That's right.
Okay.
We would do it because
That
Fells
it's not
Point.
tied into this, it's.
That's right. That's right. And look at Fells Point, it's a historic area. You know, we picked Fells Point because it's the lowest point and it's got the most nuisance flooding, and the biggest challenge is because you're dealing with buildings that have been there for 200 years, a lot of them. And it's so much more challenging to retain that character and manage the floodplain. So we don't have the final report yet, Councilman, but when we do, we'll be setting up meetings with you and the citizens to talk about what some of our options are.
Okay.
Okay, so when we talk about this floodplain overlay district that we are now incorporating, the April 2014, that takes into account these types of factors also?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, there's something called freeboard, where we make you design the building above what's called base flood elevation, which is the calculated hydrologic analysis of floods. We raised that from a FEMA regulated 1 foot to 2 feet in anticipation of sea level rise and increased flooding. So basically, these buildings are protected to an extra foot. And basically what we're trying to do is set it up so that even though there is increasing rain and increasing flooding, that the impacts to the community are so minimal that they almost don't see it. They call that resilience.
Okay, you said Baltimore City has the second highest increase of nuisance flooding in the state.
In
As
a
a-
recent study by NOAA,
Over what time period?
I believe it was the past decade.
Okay,
I'll see if I'll forward you that report.
thank you.
Councilman Clark?
Question, what's the I don't have any floodplain in my district, but, no, I don't.
Yeah, I think you're right, you don't.
I know I am. My daughter lives in a floodplain, but she's in Councilwoman Spector's district and proud to be. But what is, when you talk about nuisance flooding, Lord knows I've got that in my district, but are you talking about, does that terminology, when you're talking about it, mean from like the harbor and the bay?
You know, that's
Only?
a really
Or-
good question. Nuisance flooding is anything that comes
So
in.
in other words, my water main just blew up and they cleaned it and all the stuff backed up into my cellar. Is that nuisance flooding?
That's nuisance flooding.
Oh, well, maybe
Overwhelming.
more than
so
Councilman Kraft.
think about it this way, okay? If the storm drain system is now undersized because the rains are increasing in intensity and you're now flooding and you didn't before, even though FEMA isn't seeing that because it's not related to a stream or a coast, it's still flooding. Your basement flooded. That's called nuisance flooding.
That's part of the statistic.
I was just going to add that it has to be 2 or more acres or 2 or more properties to be considered a flood. So if it's
No
just
problem.
Yeah.
Technically considered a flood. Yeah, and the only other thing I want to add that all the council people know is that even if you're not in a floodplain, you can buy flood insurance at a greatly reduced rate. It's at least 75% reduction in cost. So if you have someone that's constantly flooding because of our storm drain system, they can buy flood insurance from FEMA. FEMA's happy to cover them.
No, they bought the director coming out and replacing water mains and sewer lines and even laterals. That was their insurance. I hear you.
Mm,
But
okay.
the, actually, the Department of Public Works in non-floodplain areas, at least in my district, is driving us all crazy, but they're restoring lines, they're fixing lines. And that's really the only thing that will work, you know what I mean? Now, down the harbor, that's a whole different thing.
Well, we're looking at, it's very tricky, but the storm drain system, remember, is separate from the sewer system.
Yeah, but
So-
it's not because the infrastructure's so old that it leaks into the sewer system regularly until you pipe burst in line or replace. So a heavy rain activates the sewage until you get the infrastructure up to standards.
Yes, that's right. That's why FEMA's willing to insure anyone, because they recognize it's not just about.
Wouldn't it be better for, well, that, no, never mind. Let me not go off into that tangent.
If you have any questions, you can call either myself or I would stick to Zane, actually.
Working here with, you're over at planning now?
But that's correct, and I love to talk about this stuff, so I'd be happy to go off on a tangent with you.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. And we can go on to critical areas then?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm going to have, we have Amy Gilder-Basati, who is our critical area coordinator, and she's going to just take the lead. I'm going to hand the whole thing off to her. But I also would like to introduce Amber Widmere, who's the natural resource planner for the city of Baltimore from the Critical Area Commission. So like whenever, there's a relationship here that's very direct. We work on our program, the state oversees our work on our program to assure that it's consistent with state regulations.
Beth, Laurie, can you email us or get the names of the new employees that work for planning department for the whole?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just one more minute. Could you say that all over again, who everybody just is? Amy?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to let Amy spell her
Sure.
own name.
AMY. And last name, well, there are different Amy's sometimes. GILD as in dog, ER hyphen B as in boy, USATTI.
And excuse me, Mr. Chairman, and what do you do?
I'm the critical area program coordinator,
Oh, okay.
and I'm also
Department?
Department of Planning.
Thank you.
What- yeah.
She's also in the Office of Sustainability.
Amber Woodmere she's the one who's here. She's an natural resources planner with the Critical Area Commission.
And Mary Pat, Jennifer's going to get a list. She's going to disseminate it to all
I'd like to know names when I'm looking at
Yeah,
faces.
I agree. But just on a follow-up, she's going to,
Amber,
come in
so
print.
Amber works for the critical area.
For the state of Maryland. It's under the State Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you.
Okay.
Still don't know. She works for the state? Okay.
Okay, so the critical area section is subtitle 4. And we will have to get a few more copies, but I think the committee members got their copies. So that starts on where we left off, the middle
123.
of page 123.
Page 123.
And Amy will explain, if I understand the committee's questions from last month, it was focusing on what is state regulation or state required versus where the city of Baltimore has leeway in the critical area. So Amy's given you a handout and she will explain what's there. And then Amber obviously can handle any of the questions in terms of the state role.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just to give you a little bit of background, the critical area regulations and program began with the state mandate in 1984, the Critical Area Act, and then the city's program was adopted in 1988. And basically, the state regulations require the city to adopt a program and give some guidelines on what elements need to be included, and so that's some of what's included within the zoning code. And recognizing that the jurisdictions within the critical area are very different. The city's program is different than, for instance, the Eastern Shore counties, because our development patterns are significantly different, so that gives us some leeway in how our program works. And the purpose of the program is, did I turn this? Okay, it's
good.
on. Recognizing the value of the land along the water, both for development and for habitat and water quality, and taking those things into account with development and land use decisions. So I've provided today highlighted sections of the code, going through the key. Anything that's in plain text is the same both in the existing and the proposed zoning code, and it's not anything that's subject to the state regulations. Areas highlighted in green are additions to the that appear in the new zoning code that didn't appear in the existing code and are also not subject to the state regulations. Yellow highlighted areas are the same both in existing and proposed, and those align with the state code. The aqua color, those are additions and changes that appear in this proposed code to better align with the state code. And then the gray highlighted areas are new amendments proposed by the Department of Planning, many of which are in response to comments that Lori had provided to me from the council. And then within your copy, there are also some pink notes in the margins that provide either references to the state code so that you can understand where those come from, or notes related to what the change is so that that can be better understood. And one thing I wanted to point out that I only noticed when the pages were being discussed, my page number starts on page 125. I think it was a mistake in the Word document, so your page numbers might not align with the copy of Transform that you have. And then the other note that I wanted to make was I also included one of the definitions pages from an earlier section of the code where the critical area management program is defined, just to propose a change to an abbreviation that appears in an earlier section of the code. And that's the first page after this, this key sheet that's labeled as page 20. And then the remainder of it is the subtitle 4 section. And and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So what you have reflects basically a markup of page 123 to page 134, hopefully answering the questions as to what's city, what's state, and noting your comments from the last work session.
This is great.
Do you just want to go through this? Okay, go ahead. Huh? Yeah. Okay.
Anymore. I
Yeah,
don't
that's what
think
I'm
we can do it, today. I mean, I need a little time to read it and digest it.
We can't, I mean, we're not going to be able to absorb this and then come back with questions on this. We're going to have to take time to read all this and then.
Yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think I
go
can,
ahead.
yeah, I don't think I can sit here in the next 5 minutes and read all this and
Sure.
ask you the questions. I mean, I personally, I think I need some time to like sit down and.
Okay,
do
if there are
this.
any, that's fine. Amy can come back for the next work session if that works. But are there any sort of big picture questions maybe for Amber while she's here in terms of how the program works from a state to a local perspective? Because we could answer those. Essentially, the state sets some basics. We can be stricter. We can't be more lenient
Right.
than the state. But maybe if you have any questions for her.
Yeah,
how-
what about, can we, I mean, as I sit here, like on page 20, what is that, pink or beige, where you have the comments on the margin?
That's
Yeah.
just, it's a very simple correction where in the proposed code, the definition is for critical area management program, and then next to it, the in parentheses is CBCA, and really that should be CAMP for critical area management program. So that's just a very simple correction that's
So
proposed.
all the comments in the margins are either like type of corrections, or they're the notes from the last work session that I captured. The committee obviously remembers that we had a typo in 10,000. It is $1,000 fine, not a $10,000 fine. So those margin comments are simply reflecting
It's
those
providing
types of
supportive
corrections.
information for what the change
Okay.
relates to.
So what I'm recommending is that at our next work session, if you could come back, and that way, if there's any questions from the committee members, we can ask after we've had time with this.
Okay.
But Councilwoman Middleton?
I was, in fact, you kind of started one of my questions. I was going to ask about the fines that are set, and are the fines in coordination with the fines around the entire state, or do we set our own within the city? And it would be good to really get information about the fines so we can have the perimeters that we would want to set if we set our own.
On the very last page of the packet that I provided, that's where the fines are defined, and I've shown the change from 10,000 to 1,000 that was requested. And then with that, I made a note that basically COMAR, which is the state code, it allows jurisdictions to set fines as high as $10,000. The city may choose to set a lesser amount, which then the comment was to set it to 1,000.
I have a question. Yeah, so I guess mine is for Mr. Petro. And that is, in looking at that note, COMAR allows local jurisdictions to set civil fines as high as $10,000. The city may choose to set a lesser fine amount. I was under the impression that we were restricted to it. Now, is that a charter restriction, or what is this? Is the city restricted to 1,000?
You want to use the microphone, Lori?
I mean, yeah.
The $1,000 limit is in our express powers, which are granted to us by the state. So the state is free to require us to, or allow us to, by state legislation, have specific fines that are higher.
So, so that COMAR, regardless of what it says in COMAR's not an interpretation or I mean, it's not something that's interpreting the
Comar regulations are authorized by state law, so
Right.
they're under color of law. So I think they would have the same impact
Yeah.
as Maryland
Yeah,
annotated
no, a
code
lot of
provision.
times we pass laws and then and then it authorizes the passage of regulations, and then the regulations actually do more than the laws do, or they actually change what the law is by.
Well, they can't do that.
Well, they're not supposed to do that. But,
That's true.
But in reality, they end up doing it. So that's where my question was coming from is, does the fact that Comar says local jurisdictions can set the limits as high as $10,000, does that color the fact that,
Well, it would, because we get our express powers where that $1,000 limitation
okay,
is from state law. So they can alter that if they are doing it with respect to the entire state, which they are. So in that, we are specifically authorized by state law to charge a higher fine for this type of violation.
so we could go up to 10,000 on this
I believe we
particular
could.
thing?
Yes.
You believe we could?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilwoman,
So,
My question that I was going to ask, so the answer is yes. So, that made a big difference. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Can we put it in this code? Or do we have to say, as authorized by Comar, blah, blah? Or what? I mean, we have to make that policy decision.
how would that be implemented? mean,
I think that it would be important to cite the state enabling legislation when you set your fee, if it's going to be over 1,000, because it will be confusing when other fees, it's widely known that other fees are limited to 1,000.
I agree with my colleagues. I think it is important, since this is something we haven't really investigated in over 40 years, that we definitely need to update the money.
Councilwoman Spector?
I think the bigger question
Hold on,
is-
Ricky.
I think the bigger question is, are we collecting this for the state, or does it go in our coffers? Who gets this money?
City? You want to
Is the
answer
city?
that?
So because we have been given the power to, and I don't want to talk for lawyers over here or the state, but my understanding from enforcing this law for a really long time is that we manage the program, they oversee our management, okay? Because we're managing the program, the funds not only stay with the city, but they go into an account required by the critical area law that is to be used for the express purpose of meeting that law.
So it doesn't commingle with other funds.
It does not.
Yeah, it doesn't go into general fund, it
No,
goes into a special.
it cannot by
account.
law.
And so that's clear.
Mm-hmm.
Councilwoman Clark, microphone?
So, I think that we should consider going up to as high as $10,000 per Comar, blah, blah, blah. I mean, basically, whoever gets the money for a fine, the people that are building or wanting to build in critical areas, they're big developers. They're not like people building, a seaside shack.
Correct.
And $1,000, like, they spend on lunch. So maybe if we could raise it or have the potential to, and we could do it daily, I mean, it might get somebody's attention.
That could be a Councilwoman Mary Pat.
I think it
Clark's
would
amendment.
get their attention.
I'd be glad to. I'll never be able to have a fundraiser again in my life, but I haven't had one for 5 years anyway.
Councilman Kraft?
Yeah, I just want to tag on to that, and I want to ask Beth a question also. So first, my tag on to Councilwoman Clark. Yeah, I mean, I have found, and we've talked about this before, that a lot of these fines, and we have a lot of development in Southeast Baltimore, it's just the cost of doing business, But if the fine if each day is an individual offense, and the fine is $10,000 a day, then all of a sudden, the cost of doing business gets very expensive very quickly.
It rises to somebody's attention that has their own office.
Exactly. My second question is to Beth, if the money doesn't go into the general fund, and there's restrictive use on it, right? So could it go in a dedicated green fund?
So the two funds created by law, I'm going to have Amy, short answer is my understanding is no. But I'm going to let that lawyer over there, Elena, and the state answer the question for sure. The thing is that the state law is very, it's not that it's narrow, but it defines clearly what this program is and what the funds can be used for. So our green fund might not be narrow enough to find.
Well, the thing is that under our enabling legislation for the green fund, right, we are allowed to create continuing non-lapsing funds, right?
That's correct.
So we can create a fund that doesn't exist today, and we could create the fund that would meet the restrictions.
I'm not clear about
Can
what
we
the
do
law
this?
says, so I'm going to hand it over to the two over there, the
These
three
guys
over
should explain the law, but I think the council may also be interested in, we don't have a lot of violations. This is only about violations. We do
I understand.
have fees for development in the critical area already that are going into the fund that is doing this work.
I don't want any development in
So-
the critical area.
Okay. Can you
So
talk
hell
about
with
the
fees.
restriction?
I just
The
don't want
question
them
is,
developing there.
are there ways to create a separate fund for
Are
the
there ways to
violation?
ban development in the critical area?
Is what banned in the critical area?
To ban development in the critical area.
Ban
To
it?
ban.
I mean, the critical area is
It's
the
1,000
land within
feet.
1,000 feet of the shoreline, so that's a significant portion of.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
I mean,
lot
that's
of land.
significant parts of downtown and Canton and Fells Point and then the industrial
Well, I know, but
areas.
they're
so that-
already
Harbor East.
grandfathered in.
but ban new development aside from what's.
We could play with that what areas could be or couldn't be.
I mean, we're allowed to be stricter than state code. That would be much stricter than
Okay.
state
That-
code.
that- that is something
But
you
go
have
back
to
to my main question about the money. What can we do with the money?
The question, as I understand it, is could there be a third fund created?
A
For this-
separate fund, yeah. Could the
for
city
this fee-
create its
For
own
the
fund?
fines.
From
for
the
violations.
violations?
Yes.
For the purpose of,
For the purpose of using
Receiving.
for cleaning up the harbor, for
That's what it's used for now.
for improving the natural condition of our
violation funds, so I'm not
parks
quite
or
sure
something like that, but specifically environmental, could it be
okay, the fees that we get for development in the critical area are currently used for projects in the critical area. Okay.
That wasn't my question. My question was about the fine money, which that you said could not go into the general fund.
Okay.
Violation money, right?
I think that would have to be a question for one of the attorneys.
Okay, can we find the answer? Somebody give us an answer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time
Yeah.
on this.
I don't know that. I haven't read the state law provisions in a while, but I will go back and review them and
Okay,
and try
all
to
right.
answer your question.
Thank you.
Just as a matter of record, it's, all of this discussion, I'm sure, is about a matter of prevention and not really about the fines. We want to prevent any issues right from the very beginning.
Right, yeah, right.
I think Councilman Kraft said, if there is,
Yeah. I don't want the money, but if we
Don't
get the money, let's use it for something related to that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I like your ban idea.
okay. You all right? Okay,
Okay, so are there any questions the committee has for the state? Because it would be harder for her to come back for the next session.
is there any questions?
So in terms of the overarching program. And of course, you know, the city, as well as every jurisdiction, is represented on the State Critical Area Commission, the sort of public deciding body. So, me. Um, but my term is up in 9 months if you're interested.
You kidding? They probably have a meeting someplace like.
Crofton.
Brownsville.
Oh, Crownsville.
Laurie, at the next work session, after the committee reads through this and dissects, so when they come back, who will be here to answer the questions that
Amy.
you'll be coming back?
Amber
Okay.
said that it wouldn't be a problem for her to come back.
All right, okay. What else we have? Is that?
We're caught up and ready for Title 8, I think.
So is there any other questions or comments before that we conclude with this and go on to Article 8?
My question is, when we all prepare for the next hearing,
Work session.
work session, is this going to be on that agenda, or
Yes.
it'll be?
Yes.
So we're coming back to start with this review of critical areas?
Correct.
And then we go forward into
To the next
titles.
article.
Okay, that's great.
So, everyone good?
No.
Everyone good? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Laurie, Beth, Amy. Thank you. Now we are on to the committee. We are ready to go on to Title 8 on page 135. And Councilwoman Clark, you have text amendments? Okay, go ahead.
Mainly I have.
We gotta,
table.
yeah, just do what you gotta do, or then we'll, huh? Yeah, we're on time, yeah.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, are we going to be doing the tables or just the text?
No, we're not gonna, we're just gonna.
So
do
we're
this.
separating those out. So you just want to focus on starting on page 135?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we could go back and look at the tables ourselves if we have any questions, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The city agencies had no amendments in Title 8.
Okay. No agencies whatsoever, right?
Not
Just
as of the
planning?
Planning Commission. I should correct that. Not as of the Planning Commission, unless there may have been some that have arisen since then.
Yeah, let staff can do that. Ready?
Yeah, I gotta save one for myself.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John?
I just asked the state employees here for a copy of the very last thing on the Critical Area Commission was the fines and procedures are supposed to be in accordance with the administrative enforcement procedures of the Critical Area Management Program. So I've just asked them to give us a copy of that so we could make sure that we're following those proper procedures in the imposition of any fines.
Just to clarify, you want the management, a copy of
They're
the-
going to send it. The state people are going to send it. The very last line in what they did.
But is it this, I believe it's the city program. Is that the city program or state program it's referring to?
Well, they put a blue in here as amending this,
Okay.
referring to that document. So that's
Okay.
what I was.
We'll get
looking
that for you.
And that was for Councilman Kraft's inquiry as well.
Okay, so you're gonna get that to the committee? Thanks, John.
Jennifer and for distribution or?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll ask Amy to do that, but I mean,
Yeah, to
Jennifer should be the point
yes,
person.
and then she'll give it to the committee members, okay? All right, Councilwoman Clark, are you ready?
Yeah, I don't kick in till page 138.
Oh, okay. I see page 135. You got page 135 through 138. So your amendment is on page 138. Okay, I got
I
it.
just handed off my last.
Okay, let's look at page 135.
Most of my amendments, Mr. Chairman, in this title, and in the immediately following titles, have to do with the tables. And I know we're not taking that up when we're reviewing the titles, but they're where, that's where the heart of it all is.
So no amendments on page 135. Now we're on page 130, 136.
I've already been through this. Where are we?
Page 9. Okay, page 137, regards to design standards.
May I ask a question
Councilman-
about,
yes,
I don't
Councilman
have an
Clark.
amendment. May I ask a
Yes,
question
go ahead,
about?
go ahead.
Mhm,
What page and,
I'm on page 137, corner lot facades.
okay, it's the line 19 on 137?
Exactly.
8504?
Yeah.
Go
Can I
ahead.
ask?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask planning something. We, this is about blank walls facing neighborhoods. I totally agree with the provision, but I ran across something in working with CHAP and the Crittenden project that I had not thought about in my life before, and it affects this, and it affects it in a negative way, and it's very, current. And so we looked at in the Crittenden project, there are groups of 6 or 7 homes, and then at the end of each of the group, on both ends, you have walls, it's the end of group. And it's the oddest set, oh, thank you so much, Paul, thank you. It's the oddest set of windows. They're it's odd, it just doesn't look like a regular row house. And it was explained that it's because of big TV screens, all right, so see that? Which is not a television, or I don't know what it is, but it's that's a big screen something. Well, people are buying big screen somethings for their homes. And so they don't want windows, so that people are not designing windows for light in the house, they're designing windows around big screen TVs. I thought that was so odd, and I'm sure it's a passing fancy, because actually, I think the United States is moving to miniaturization instead of gargantuism. And it will probably reverse itself soon. But we'll have all these houses with little people windows at odd places, and it looks terrible. Now, have you thought of that? Is there anything we can do about that? Is there a way for, it's happening.
Of course, nothing in this code was intended to regulate interior design, but again, it was intended to address issues of neighborhood character. These design guidelines are fairly basic as they are written, and they're intended to give some flexibility, and if there is some level of staff review of these, I'm not sure we can totally solve that screen issue. This chapter speaks to detached houses. It may be a different animal in detached versus row houses.
Okay.
We certainly are trying to maintain some neighborhood character, and that's the intention here.
Row house, but it's going to be just as awful in new construction, and everything is not CHAP. And actually, CHAP was like, well, they got these big screen TVs inside. So I guess what I would just say is, this reminds me that it is a positive attribute to have windows on the the sides of houses, for just a whole lot of reasons, including energy. Like open the window instead of turn on the air conditioner. So I would ask planning to take up this issue. Interior design is dominating this aspect of exterior design, even at the level of CHAP, and it is really weird.
Okay, well, when we drafted this page on the design facades, this language is all new. We don't have this authority today, so this is increasing the authority to require windows. And it really was as a result of some of the new construction, probably primarily in Councilwoman Spector or Middleton's district, that we've seen where they have tried to do those blank walls on sides. And, we think this is a good first step without over managing, design too much, but to speak to the sort of public character. We always hear the expression, you can't legislate taste. Right. You can only go so far, and our draft, we believe, tries to hit the sweet spot there.
If I could just say one other thing, you can legislate energy conservation. If nothing else, we have the right, with all the stuff we're doing and blah-de-blah, and,
yes,
climate
I think
change
Councilman Kraft is doing that with the new code adoption, so.
I just say to my colleagues,
okay,
we should not close the window on windows in this code if we are asked to be part of the design component of a zoning code, which, we don't want a design component of a zoning code that we do not approve. We don't want it just to be laid on top. So if we're in it, we should be in it we should, open the windows on the design features that are beginning to dominate the landscape. It's like peephole city.
Yeah. So, Laura, you got that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
If we can come back to that?
fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Kraft?
I want to go in that same section just on design standards. So they talk about these facades and additions as to what are there, and then in the preface, in general, it says they're subject to the standards, and then design review exception can be granted as provided in 4406. And then 4406 says about it can't be address every anticipated architectural design in these sections, which I guess are the R zoning categories, right? So when we're saying that, if you're in CHAP, right?
That would supersede.
CHAP would supersede, but where in this here does it say that CHAP supersedes the design standards?
That'll take me a minute. I believe it's in 4, but I may need to find that. The discussion came up through the hearings because of exactly what you're saying, that we recognize that CHAP is under its own ordinance. It has to supersede.
Right.
And I will have to find that reference for you.
Okay, I remember having the conversation before, but I can't remember, how it, so my question is, how do people know that CHAP supersedes this, okay?
I will get that for you.
Okay, so that would be my first thing here. And now my second thing is, again, where it refers back on line 6 and 7 on page 137. Let me finish my note here.
Go ahead.
Okay, so when it refers back there, and you look at, again, going back to 4406, for that can be granted as shown in 4406. In 4406, on page 82, on lines 5 and 6, under the authority, it says, no administrative exceptions may be granted for any of the use, bulk, or yard standards of the zoning district. So does that mean that if someone comes in and asks for the director to approve a different design standard than that approved outside of a CHAP district, right? That even if the director were to approve that person cannot go to BMZA and ask for any type of a variance dealing with use, bulk, yard standards?
Not exactly. The language there is intended to separate and make clear the authorities. The director has no authority to vary bulk. Only, this language is intended to say the director can only, speak to the design standards, the window placement, the building materials, to make it very clear to the applicant that if they need or want some sort of bulk or other variance, that's a board issue and can't be handled administratively.
Well, as I interpret it, and I'm just trying to get clarity. Okay? So, but it says, if you want to have an administrative design review exception to these standards.
Right.
Right? So basically what you're saying is, if you want to do something other than this, which is generally what you would go to the BMZA for, right? You would go to appeal to get something outside, of the zoning code itself. But what this is saying is, if you want to get an exception to the standards, which we don't call exception, a variance, right? this says you go to 4406. And then in 4406 is saying, this is the authority. This is what we can give you. We can give you this, but we can't give you that.
Right.
So it would, if you would read this, if you're the citizen, you're the community person who's reading it, saying, okay, well, they can say they can do this, but so if they want to change the facade or something like that, okay, they can do that because the director can do that, but they can't, I don't need to worry about use, bulk, or yard standards because they can't do that, because the only way they can get an exception to these standards is by going to the director, and the only exception the director can give them is regarding this. The director can't give them an exception on that, so there is no exception here.
I think the intention is to make it clear that there's a separation in authority and that in no way is the director stepping in the board's territory, which is bulk use. If a homeowner wants to do an addition on their home and it needs a side yard variance because the porch is going to go 5 feet out, let's say, they would have to go to the zoning board for that yard variance. That's not a change. That's how it is today. The design standards proposed here are brand new. And in drafting them, many communities, builders, and others said to us, well, you know, you can't in design standards take into account every quirky home.
No, I understand.
So therefore,
that's not my
right.
part of the issue.
But we could, I guess, to get to what you're saying, we could, if it would help with clarity, and I would defer to the council, to say something in 406 to say no administrative exceptions may be granted for any use bar. You could say those types must go to the BMZA
That's more simple.
per the other section. You know, in other words, to loop it back
I like that.
so that it makes it clearer, if that's helpful.
Do that. That sounds better.
Huh?
I'd like to follow up when you're done.
Okay. Well, that, I mean, that's where I was going. If we want to say that, you know, I think that's a decision we have to make, is are we going to allow it at all? Or if we are going to allow it, we're saying the director can't do it, you got to go to BMZA.
Well, the code today, and as proposed, provides for use, bulk, and yard variances. And that's already in this other title. Maybe you just cross-reference it back. So it further clarifies the separate paths.
No, I understand that, but what it's saying here is, what this is saying is, you got to follow these rules for design standards, okay? That's what it's saying. And then it's saying, well, we recognize the fact that these design standards aren't going to apply all the time. So if they don't apply, you can go to the director and you can say, okay, they don't apply, so I'd like you to look at this and consider it because they don't apply. But we're going to allow the director this discretion, but we're, you know, to you know, do whatever, but we're not going to allow the director to vary the use, bulk, or yard standards because
that would be illegal.
Those design standards we're going to stick with. So the question is,
use, bulk,
wait a
I
minute,
think
no,
use,
let me
bulk
f-
are not
no,
design
no, let
standards.
me-
That's important. Use,
let
the
me-
reason it's there is
let
use,
me
bulk, yard
finish.
are not design
Let
standards.
me finish. Okay. Well, that's the thing, right? No, they're bulk regulations,
Exactly.
right? Okay. No, I got it.
Councilman
Okay.
Kraft?
So
That's why we're separating it. But if there's a better wording, we're fine.
On line 5, on page 82,
right.
would it satisfy you to say the director of planning may not approve,
Right, we could flip it.
and then that way it's a parallel structure and it's clear that what he can approve and what he cannot approve?
I think that may be more in line what he may approve and may not approve. I know Councilwoman Clark has
And then you're
something to
not in
follow.
conflict with the BMZA
Right, 'cause
section.
then you're taking out that administrative exception language so that You say authority, the director may approve these, the director may not approve those.
Correct.
And then that's clear as to who may approve them.
Right.
That falls more in line with what I'm.
It's
fine with us.
more, Councilwoman Clark? Okay.
Look,
What page were you? What's that?
I think truer words were not spoken, but then you can't legislate taste. Mr. Chairman and members, this intertwining of design standards into a zoning code has bothered me from the beginning. And I have been the one that insisted, I think I'm the one that insisted, that any ancillary powers have to be approved by city council. But this is not CHAP. The Planning Commission is not CHAP. You want to have your, I know I'm worried about windows and I want them to take it up, but I'm sorry, I can't see you.
In this instance, I wasn't talking about chat.
No, I'm talking about CHAP.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying the design standards which have been integrated into the draft of a land use document, I believe are inappropriately in this code in their entirety. Because and I'm not saying it wasn't done with good intentions, but this is a land use code. This is about things that CHAP looks at after going through a legislative process where things are landmarked, etc. This is generic, spread through this code, and I believe inappropriate. There's no way to fix it if the Planning Commission is going to have power through this code about how something looks. Now, I think that's at the core of this discussion. And it has been said, I'm just saying it again, because it muddies the water of what the code says and who's in charge of what. What process is there for a planning commission director, and a finer person never lived, what's muddier than he sits around and decides what some, design standards or whether they should be applied and what the heck they mean anyway. I mean, we want people to develop in the city. It's hard enough they got to go to the zoning board. Well, it's hard for...
That's a different animal.
It's different. At least don't get me off on that. But this is a confusing portion of this proposed code. Now, if there are going to be design standards, we need to approve them. I think we should pull them all out of this code and take that as a separate document to review and consider, and let it sit on the side while we get the use code done. And so I don't want this confusion for people who are trying to do something with their property.
I think for the council's benefit, this has been a topic for a number of work sessions, sort of in and out. And just to sort of put the big picture here, there are two sets of standards that were developed: the landscape manual, which we've discussed and you've reviewed, as well as design standards. And as drafted, the building design standards were incorporated in the zoning code at a very, I don't think they get down to dictating taste. They're pretty neighborhood oriented and fairly basic and focus on pedestrian friendly, not getting into minutia. But the Planning Commission, in their recommendation to this committee, did recommend that the design standards be pulled out and put in a separate manual that could be updated separately, as we recommended with the landscape standards. So it seems that maybe the sort of overarching where these things should land would be sort of the first discussion to resolve, and then get into the content of them. So, we can discuss that further today or go into that as a separate item. But rather than trying to do a line-by-line fix, I think you have to agree on the approach.
Signing.
Exactly.
Because if I recall correctly, when we were doing some of the earlier chapters, Councilwoman Clark had amendments that were more line by line, that were reflecting a request to incorporate landscape into the code. Now we're discussing taking design out. So again,
My amendments always said were as approved by city council. In other words, you will see that my amendments going through landscaping as well as through design, when I have amendments, they always just happen to mention that we have the authority to approve such things.
okay.
Yes, you're correct. Wherever they land, we want the approval process, and I agree with my colleague from the planning department. We need to pull these out of here, get them out of the way, and see what we've got in terms of land use, and then address design standards as a separate document and landscape as a separate document over which city council has enactment authority. But it's all mushed together, and there's a confusion of authority. I don't want the zoning board being asked if it's okay about the how the side of a row of row houses looks. Jeezy peasy. We'll be there all year.
And again, as the code is drafted today, it's not the zoning board on those design standards.
But we need to get them out of here, do land use, and come back
Okay.
and do design and get it straight, but not to try to put them together in this mishmash that people have to use as a manual for living.
If it's easier for the committee, what we could do is to, highlight or point out where the design standards are and have a session to then look at kind of almost a flow chart where you want them, look at the options of where you want them to be, and then, kind of mark it up. I'm not sure if that methodology works.
But if the, but if the ultimate landing place is the city council, ultimate landing place.
Yes.
Decision, does it have to be presented as a bill?
Yeah.
I would think so.
That's what I'm trying to say. It would be presented just like a zoning change.
And
It should be presented as a cogent,
the reason,
subject document that we can examine per se, and that's legislation.
The Councilwoman, you good? Okay. So, I think that maybe we should, Councilwoman Clark brings up a very good point, and I think all of us agree on this. I'm telling her, yeah. I think all of us agree on this, and what I'm stating to the committee is that when we come back, the next work session, that we not only talk about the state regards to the floodplain.
It's critical
work
area.
on this, and do we need to introduce an ordinance? Because I'm looking at PUDs where you have, like, on design standards, the major and minor. We don't want something minor that has to come back to the council. Do I make sense there?
okay, well, I think the PUDs are a slightly different discussion. We haven't gotten into that title.
Okay. The design. I'm talking about the design of something.
Even the design in the PUDs is a different procedure
Okay.
than a routine item. The design standards as drafted in this bill are organized by the use category. So there's design standards for single family, for row houses, and for commercial buildings. Very minimal for industrial. And they're each in, so Title 8 is the single family, Title 9 is the row houses. We'd be open to working with the committee in whatever method makes sense to discuss that sort of flow.
Sorry, hold up a minute. Hold up a minute.
That's what I'm saying. It should be a bill. It should, like, pull it out, have a vote next, when we look at it, have a vote to decide whether we want to yank it and introduce it as separate legislation.
Okay, we can, yeah.
Okay.
No, I know.
What?
Yeah, if she was saying something, I told her. There's nobody.
Yeah. Laurie?
Yes,
Yeah. I'm sorry about that, but just,
that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah, you gotta do it.
We're gonna
It's gotta be
bring it back on the table at the next work session, and we'll work on this. And
Oh, that'll
you
be
come up with something. John, is that?
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, if the staff could just let me know how you want to structure that session so we have the right information for you and the right people.
Well, my only observation, looking through some of the other sections, you've got design standard sections in each
Right.
area.
That's why, yeah,
Detached, attached,
Right.
commercial. So if the concept is to pull all the design standards out, then that needs to be clearly stated at the next meeting.
correct. That's why I was suggesting we could mark it up and just sort of highlight the pages where they are in each different chapter and pull them out, and or do you really just want to discuss the organization of
Paul, yeah. Okay. We'll pull, I mean, I think we need to start from the beginning. I mean, just pull them out and then dissect, so.
Well, what we could do is working with the staff, we could list the titles, the subtitles of where they are, and sort of draft up what it would be, you know, remove subtitle, whatever, in each of the right places, so you have a list, and then figure out where you want them to
But
be.
then,
If that,
okay, what I'm requesting is that we're planning to work with Kara and Jennifer, okay? When the package is, put it together, and then when we have the work session, I'm gonna have, planning work with, the president's office and Jennifer. To package this, work with planning, that way when we come to the work session, we'll have it together, okay?
okay.
This has to work for 40 years for the city of Baltimore.
And
gotta
Ricky
take the
wants to
time.
keep being elected throughout that period, so
Okay,
we need to have a good code.
But the time that they spend here is well spent.
yeah, okay. Okay, where, now I am lost. Page 137, we were on, what, line 19, corner lots. Okay, now, we're still on page, any other thing on 137, any corrections?
I know.
Okay, we're on
Give me one
page,
staff person.
now on page 138.
It's very minor.
Which would be other applicable standards, 8601 on 137 to page 138.
I have a amendment.
You have an amendment?
I do. Chairman, members of the committee, page 138, at the end of line 12, I have the following amendments. All landscaping and screening must comply with the regulations of the, and I add Baltimore City Landscape Review Manual. and I add as approved by city council. So wherever everything goes, I hope that amendment will stick with it as indicated. I also have, Mr. Chairman, which I will not have the chance to discuss, I believe, a lot of amendments proposed for the tables to Title VIII, tables that apply to detached and semi-detached residential. And I ask if the committee will please accept these as proposed, so that when we get to the tables, it won't be a surprise, because one of the changes is I've changed my community-managed open space into two categories, one called inclusive and one called community garden. And I've gotten rid of all those,
Councilwoman,
oh,
the microphone?
Are we not doing tables?
No, Mr. Vice Chair and Mr. Chair, I know you're not doing tables now, but my mind requires me to do tables in conjunction with titles. Because,
I got it.
all right.
Go ahead.
And so when we get all the way to the end of all the titles and we're looking at tables, we're going to have to turn ourselves back to remember, and that's fine. I just want to have it now.
You have it. Go ahead.
That's it.
You got it. Go.
Thanks.
Is that it?
That's it for Title VIII.
It's just for reference. How much time? We have 20 minutes. How much bill do you have on?
For Title IX, I have two amendments, and I have, of course, I have table amendments, which are very important with regard to fraternity and sorority houses.
I suggest we wait. It's gonna take more than.
We're going to conclude, or go in recess until next.
Begin with Title IX.
We're going to conclude, Councilwoman, and go into the committee to the next work session on Title IX.
So Title IX, Mr. Chairman, can you outline what we're going to do the next time we meet and how many meals we'll have to pack in order to get through the day? Okay, so we're going to start with design standards that planning will have pulled and consolidated for our review, and we will take a vote on whether we should segregate design standards from and introduce them as a separate ordinance, as a land use ordinance. And then we're going to start Title IX.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, we're going to do
We're gonna do
critical
critical areas,
areas. What are we going to do with them?
Yeah.
We're gonna do,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna do the, we're gonna review the handout that was given to us on the critical areas.
Oh,
and-
right.
And do any follow-up on that.
Okay.
Then we're gonna do what you just discussed with
Critical
regard to
areas,
design
standards.
and then we're gonna pick up on Title IX.
Thank you very much.
Is that a 2-hour session?
That's a 2 hours getting
Yeah.
through
Play it here.
the first two
No,
things.
I'm going to announce it now. We're just going to do September 9th. Where's that script at? Do I need this? Okay. Next work session on City Council Bill 12-0152, which is transform Baltimore zoning, will be Tuesday, September 9th at 5 p.m. I want to thank everyone for attending the committee. And I just want to say that
September
What?
9th?
we're going to announce this Monday, the next council.
The 9th
meeting date.
is it 5?
Okay.
It says September what?
And that's September, now the next work session is Tuesday, September the 9th
Oh, I thought that was
at 5 PM. Okay?
Boy,
Yeah. And
wait a minute.
daytime. I can't be a daytime Tuesday.
are you listening? The
Yeah.
next work session, Rick, is Tuesday, September 9th
Can't be here.
at 5 PM. And then at the next council meeting, I will announce the rest of the work sessions for the fall.
I can't.
Okay? So this concludes.
Mr. Chairman, I know what my schedule is for the 9th of September. It's like a nightmare. And I really want to be here for this design standards thing. Can we take that up at the meeting that follows, so I have some kind of lead time to, since that's my
Okay, it's
issue?
tentative, and I'll get back to the committee on the date and time.
Okay, because
We're
the
not gonna
9th
solve
is a
that now.
total disaster.
Okay.
At
Karen-
5, 5:30, 6:30, and 7.
I know, Councilwoman Clark, we don't need, we're not gonna go through everybody's schedule. What we're gonna do is that the president's office will confer with the committee, and we'll come up with a new time.
Thank you. Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
Earlier that day.
We're gonna-
I could
we're
do
gonna confer
that.
with- Yeah. It's tentative. It's tentative.
Yeah, I could do
Yeah.
that.
Okay, it's tentative. We'll work on that.
2:00 in, 10.
Okay.
Are you?
So this concludes the work session on the bill. Thank everyone for
I could
attending.
do that.